Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation titled Supporting Family Members with Co-Occurring Disorders. Before we begin, we would like to remind you that this is a safe and friendly space with positivity and productivity. There are a few housekeeping items I'd like to quickly go over. This presentation is being recorded, and the recording link, slides, and a certificate of attendance will be sent via email to everyone who attended today. This information will also be available on the Federation of Families website and the NASHBID's YouTube channel. Please use the chat pod to share your name and state and ask any questions you might have or share any information with the group that pertains to this presentation. And also during Q&A, you may raise your hand and Dana will call on you, or you can just, again, put your question in the chat. Closed captioning can be viewed by clicking the CC at the bottom of your screen, or clicking the link in the chat pod to review in a separate window. We also have an ASL interpreter who is spotlit on your screen. When the presentation ends and you leave the meeting, a brief survey will show in your browser. Please take a few moments to fill that out for us and let us know what you thought about today's presentation. We would like to give special thanks to SAMHSA for sponsoring this presentation, and thank you again for joining us. I will now turn this over to Dana Asby, Director of National Certification and Project Specialist at the National Federation of Families, who will share today's overview. Dana, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Next slide. We just want to make sure that we're upfront in thanking SAMHSA so much for sponsoring this webinar and letting you know that the views, opinions, and contents of this presentation are those of the presenters, not necessarily SAMHSA. Next slide. We're so pleased that you all joined us today, and we really hope to hear your voice during the Q&A session at the end of today's time together. We at the National Federation of Families use family-driven language that is trauma responsive, strengths-based, avoids blaming caregivers, is inclusive, person first, respectful, non-judgmental, and consistent with our actions. Next slide. During our hour and a half today, we hope that we can effectively describe the expertise of families as natural support in the recovery journey for individuals with co-occurring diagnoses. Our presenters are going to give you some tools and strategies that family peer specialists can use in supporting those families. And we also hope that you will learn some skills that help clinicians effectively engage families to support individuals with co-occurring diagnoses, including serious mental illness and/or serious emotional disturbance. Next slide. We are really excited about today's panel of lived expertise. We've got Muriel Jones with us today. She is not only the executive director of the Federation of Families of Central Florida, but she's also a mother of a son with mental health diagnoses, substance use challenges, and autism spectrum disorder. We're also really excited to have Rachel Craig Dunn with us. In addition to being the family program supervisor of South Florida Wellness Network, she is a former family peer specialist who has worked with families of children with co-occurring disorders. And now she oversees some of those current family peer specialists doing this work. And finally, we're really pleased to have Dr. Mark Thompson with us. He's an assistant professor in the psychiatric departments of both University of Nebraska Medical Center and Creighton University. In addition to being a clinician in a large inpatient psychiatric hospital and clinic on a medical campus, he's also the brother of an individual with co-occurring disorders. So I'm Dana Asby. I'm the Director of National Certification and a Project Specialist at the National Federation. And not only do I work at this family-run advocacy organization that certifies family peer specialists, I'm also the daughter of parents with a mental health diagnoses. So we're all here to show you that the letters after our names and our job titles might give us something to tell you where we can help talk about how to support individuals and families with co-occurring diagnoses, but we're also here with our lived expertise, which is just as an important part of our story. Next slide. You will get all of our presenters' really rich biographies to read over when you get these slides. I'm not going to spend too much time introducing Muriel because she's going to tell you her wonderful story. So right now, I'd love to pass it on. Please put any questions for the panelists in the chat throughout their presentations, and we'll get to them at the end of our time today.
Thank you, Dana. Good afternoon, everyone. And I'm so much appreciative to be a part of this conversation along with Rachel and of course with Mark, and much appreciation to SAMHSA and National for having me on board. I am Muriel Jones, and I am a parent first before an executive director. Being a parent of an adult son now who's 32 years old with a co-occurring disorder or diagnosis has been very difficult and challenging. And honestly, it prepared me, I guess, for this role as an executive director of a family-run family support organization. I can begin, you can go to the next slide. I want to start off by saying that anyone who has heard me speak before, I always talk about mental health as being the same book, just a different chapter. And that's how I feel this journey has been with my son. Each phase of supporting my son has been a different response or a different action. I will briefly go over really quickly on the autism journey with him. He was diagnosed in 1994 at age 4. I did not know anything about autism. I was not aware of autism. Only thing I knew was about, I think a few years before, there was the movie Rain Man. That's all I knew about. And I kept saying, that's not my son. But actually it was my son. My son lost his speech when he was about 2.5 years old. He just stopped talking. So I took the initiative and had him enrolled in a study group at Cornell Hospital and Medical Center in New York. And then that's when he was diagnosed on the spectrum. And from there, my response had to be, first of all, to become aware and become educated. And that was the most difficult thing because I was in denial. I had the support, though, of the school, the education, when I approached the school to get an IEP for my son. There was a very strong support, and maybe because it was autism, which is, I think, much more acceptable as opposed to a mental health diagnosis. So as I went through that journey, through chapters with him on the spectrum, I saw improvement. His speech came back when he was 6 years old. I knew that he had certain triggers, or I should say signs and symptoms. He didn't like to be around a lot of noise. He wasn't affectionate at all. There was no eye contact, a lot of flapping with the hands and the echolalia. But then as he started getting older, going into puberty, so I saw much improvement, I should say. However, I also noticed that there were some things that was not on that sheet of paper that was provided to me about autism, the signs and symptoms. And what I noticed was that he was very angry all the time, became violent. And then also he was talking to himself, which is pretty normal, but he was talking to himself in 2 voices, which alarmed me because I was just like, okay, this is not autism. And then what I found out was that my son had signs and symptoms of schizophrenia. Of course, he cannot be diagnosed with that. However, you know, it took a while before I found out when he was 16 years old that it runs on my mother's side of the family, the males. So that was something I wish I had known earlier, and he would have been experiencing all these different medications because they couldn't figure out why he was so violent. And it was, I guess, around 14, 15 when he did say that he was hearing voices. He started, and I'm watching my time because this could be a long story, but I'm going to keep it short. As he moved forward, he started experiencing with marijuana. And I guess he was, of course, self-medicating. But as he became an adult, the mental health became out of control, so to speak. I had to have him removed from the home before he was 18 years old because he tried to kill me. And that is something that no parent should ever experience, being afraid of your own child that you brought into this world. But that was something I had to, again, a different action, a different response. You can move on to the next slide. So as we went into this new chapter in his life, dealing with the substance use, where was he getting it? And he was getting it, and he was in a group home at that, but he had access to the community when his behavior was under control, so to speak. At 32 years old now, he has been unwilling to take his prescribed medication. My son has been homeless. He has been homeless here in Florida where I live, but I am from New Jersey. I had him here for 6 months as an adult, and he became homeless. He eloped and went back to New Jersey, and he became homeless in New Jersey as well. His physical and verbal aggression, I cannot stress enough. It's there. I could not deny it. It was not only towards me, but it was also towards staff that takes care of him as well. You can move on to the next slide. So as we're going forth in this journey, even now, as I'm speaking to you, my son is in a psychiatric hospital because of threats, threatening to kill people. And I'm very transparent about this. I don't sugarcoat it. And as his parent, as his mother, and I'm formally his guardian, and I'll explain to you how that whole process went. But I recognize the fact that my son is a threat to the community and to others. So some of the successes I have had with my son is, number one, I re-registered him under the Division of Developmental Disabilities in New Jersey as an adult. How did I do that? Because once I moved him out of New Jersey, he lost all those benefits. But now he's back in New Jersey. How was I able to accomplish that? I took the time to send a very strong, without emotions, but the facts, to the governor of New Jersey. And that was just before the pandemic hit. And he took it seriously. So within 7 days, I received a phone call from the New Jersey Division of Developmental Disabilities. I explained what my son is capable of doing and how this could be avoided. The other thing that I would say that has been successful is I maintain a positive relationship with my son's clinical team. I look at them as part of the team, not trying to put my son away. I'm the one that's advocating to ensure that he is in his most appropriate environment. And if that means in an environment that he has to have 24/7 supervision, then so let it be. But my son's clinical team has been actually a very strong support during this journey. And again, attaining my guardianship of my son as an adult before he turned 18, the division helped me through that process very quickly. However, as I'm older, I'll be 66 this year, it's wearing me down. And it zaps me of my energy and everything. So, but however, I did not want him just to be emancipated. That would have been just horrible to do that to him and setting him up to fail. So I retained an attorney who went through the process, and she said to me, this is very unusual. Usually when a parent is surrendering their guardianship, it's ready for that adult to be an adult, to be emancipated. But in this particular situation, I knew it was very important that the state assign a substitution of guardianship through the division, the Bureau of Guardianship. And that's what was accomplished. I believe the next slide. All right, before I go into Rachel Dunn, I will say this to those parents who are out there supporting that adult son, with a or daughter with a co-occurring disorder. And it is a very difficult journey. You should not travel it alone. And at some point, you do have to take care of yourself. And there is self-care. You have to make those hard decisions. It's tough decisions, and you're going to be judged. I have been judged every step of the way, but I know what I'm doing is in the best interest of my son. I would also encourage any family-run, family support organization to provide that extra layer of support to that particular parent, because this is something that is, as I say, it's the same book, different chapter. I just don't know how the story is going to end. So right now in my book, in my chapter, I'm in chapter 32 because Michael's 32 years old. And I'm on page 24 because today is the 24th. I don't know what tomorrow is going to hold. Like I said, he is in a psychiatric hospital. He has threatened to harm others. I take that back, kill others. So we have to know that mental health, this is serious. And I'm thankful for the clinical team that I am working with. And I'm very thankful to the state of New Jersey. I think they're doing an amazing job considering what has been happening throughout the nation. So I'm going to pass this on to Rachel Craig Dunn. Rachel.
Thank you so much, Muriel. I appreciate that. And thank you to SAMHSA and National Federation of Families for having me here. So I am going to share a bit about my story as well. I am a prior family peer support specialist. In our organization, it's called a family support partner. And I will just tell you a little bit of how I got to that position. So 15 years ago, I'm a parent of 2 young adults, and 15 years ago, my son began to have some emotional disruptions and his behavior changed a bit. So he then started to self-medicate with using marijuana. That was his first choice. And then it escalated to opiates. So for me, I will have to share that I am an immigrant to the United States. I'm from Jamaica, and I'm sure most people think that all Jamaicans smoke weed. I will let you know, I am one that has never smoked weed. So it was new to me and my family. And I think that I did not know how to handle that. So I may have overreacted. So I had to move on and find a way to communicate with my son because he said, you know, Mom, everyone smokes weed, it's nothing big. However, as I shared, it did escalate. I then went looking for help to all kinds of establishments in Broward County, which is the county that I'm in. And I have to say that I was met with a lot of information, and people shared with me knowledge that they had. I came to South Florida Wellness Network, which is a peer-run organization, as a parent looking for help. And I can let you know that I came as a parent, not looking to help myself because I didn't think I had an issue. I came as a parent trying to fix and solve and change my son. Well, I will tell you, I was pleasantly surprised in that I realized I had to change some things about myself in terms of parenting. I went through all kinds of education, and one of the ones that I will share with you that was very helpful to me was NAMI, National Alliance for the Mentally Ill. They had a family-to-family group, which is very in-depth in how a loved one who has no background in mental health and medications and signs and symptoms can learn to use certain tools. So I became involved with them. I started and I got invited to become a part of the Family Advisory Council there. I became a part of that, and then I was offered a position, which is amazing because I was an executive director before in housing and had no clue of mental health, except I was living it and going through it with my family member. So I got the position as a family support partner, and it changed my life. I think that family support is amazing. We provide emotional support to parents, family members, and caregivers. How we do that is we start with intake. We speak with the family member or the caregiver to see where they're at in their journey, because each person's journey is different and each person may have limited information or resources. So we really try and do a full intake to see where that person is, what they may need. We do a kind of wellness plan and a recovery capital scale. And then we go on to trying to impart to our parents knowledge in terms of evidence-based practices. We do offer a lot of wellness workshops, which I have found have helped our parents immensely, because a lot of them don't even realize that they themselves are going through certain challenges. A part of our journey as parents with youth with co-occurring is that we too suffer with anxiety or depression or PTSD from all of the traumas that we have gone through. So we have to be aware of what we are also going through in order to be able to accept what's happening in our own families. So I then, of course, will share my lived experience with someone if they need to know, how did I manage when I was going through it? And I share my lived experience very openly. I'll share it with anyone that's willing to listen and that wants to know. We also work on helping our family members navigate the systems of care in our county. One of the things in our county that we have a lot of great programs is that we have people that collaborate. And I find that this is positive for our parents. We offer for our parents to get involved, sit on councils, come to the table and give their lived experience to make a change within our systems of care. So I run the Federation of Families Broward. We have this Family Advisory Council, and any parent is in Broward County is welcome to come in and sit on our council and be a part of it, to be able to see what new treatments are out there, which provider agency has treatments for mental health or substance use or co-occurring. We also encourage huge educational trainings and implementations of healthy coping skills. So the educational trainings that we do work on are WRAP, which is a Wellness Recovery Action Plan, which I myself did as a parent, and then I've later learned and trained to become a trainer and facilitator of WRAP. So that is something that we offer to our parents, the Wellness Recovery Action Plan. And it's a fantastic tool, I find, to just help us to break down things in manageable ways to be able to cope. I have had parents come back and tell me that until they did WRAP, they didn't realize that they were going through things themselves. So a lot of parents have done WRAP and come back and said, oh, I had an aha moment. I realized, wow, I need to be able to see when things are breaking down for myself. And one of the analogies that I use is that we have to definitely, you know, that analogy of if you're in an airplane, you have to give yourself oxygen first. So we have to make sure we take care of ourselves first before we can take care of our loved ones. And that's a large part of the recovery process. So one of the positive things with being the family care specialist at South Florida Wellness Network is that our whole organization is one that hires peers in every realm. And so everybody there is in recovery themselves from either substance use or mental health. And so to me, that is an amazing tool to show hope and have parents and adults and youth who are going through these things be able to say, wow, this person went down this track as well, and this person is now in recovery, and this person is doing well. So it instills a lot of hope. The other thing I wanted to discuss is, you know, as a parent that came here, I shared with you, I came here as an immigrant, and English and Jamaican. So when my loved one got ill, I had a huge fear of hospitalization, as I wasn't very trustful of the systems of care. I didn't want him to have to be hospitalized. He is a youth of color, and I was concerned about that. I have to say that these concerns are real and valid for a lot of our population and a lot of our family members. So we have to, when we are giving care and supporting families, to be very cognizant of their cultural backgrounds, their beliefs, their spiritual beliefs, and it only helps us serve them in a better way, in a more holistic and spiritual way, to help them to be able to recover in the way that they would like to recover. Not everybody wants to take medication, and not everybody wants to go through a 12-step program if that is their thing. So we have found ways of having a huge diverse system of, we have Dharma recovery, we may have refuge recovery, we have celebrate recovery, we have the 12-step programs. So what we try to do is make it very diverse. So they're all roads can lead to recovery for our family members. And that's where we work on doing that. One of the other programs that I have to say that we have incorporated recently for our family members with co-occurring is to use CRAFT, which is community reinforced family training. Recently, I had my staff do this training, and it helped with how to communicate positively with your loved ones, and how to be able to use real steps and have real awareness of what it means to take care of yourself, right? As I said, we have to take care of ourselves first. And it helps us to change our interactions, CRAFT, CRAFT. It helps us to change our interactions with our loved ones. So it's another tool that we can give to our family members and parents that are that have youth or family members with substance use disorder. So those are a few of the things that we use. RAP, CRAFT. We also use WHAM, which is Whole Health Action Management. And WHAM was actually started by peers to help peers to stay healthy. And it helps to use a holistic way of managing our self-care and our wellness on every realm. So we have to take care of our mental health, we have to take care of our physical and our emotional health, and that's what WHAM does. So these are a few of the tools that help us in supporting our families that we also, yes, CRAFT is Community Reinforcement and Family Training by Dr. Robert Mayer. And that is available in the community, and you can look it up online. Also RAP, as I said, Wellness Recovery Action Plan. Some of the things that I think are important are wherever you are to really learn and know what resources are available. Okay, this is a must, as in our community, especially with the pandemic, it has shown you that things change and systems and agencies may close down. It's very important that we know what is available when we are needing resources for our family members that we are providing support to. And the other thing, we also do a lot of wellness workshops and give a lot back to our community in terms of doing field days. And we've done wellness workshops such as jewelry making and terrarium making and paint pouring. And this kind of self-care is very, very helpful for our loved ones that may not be able to afford doing stuff. Our organization is grant funded, so we can do stuff at no charge, and we're able to help our family members out in that way, as we know that things have been really, harsh since the pandemic. And with the pandemic, of course, there is going to be even more call for needing a family support partner, be it mental health or substance use or both co-occurring, as all of these things have been exacerbated and have increased since the pandemic. So that is my presentation, and I thank you so much. I will put it over to Mark.
Thank you. I will try to move quickly because I want to cover some things to help anybody on this call with some practical things. But I think starting with my story might help. I've loved listening to the other stories today too. I've got a father with schizophrenia, a brother with the co-occurring condition, and I've got a young daughter. I have several young daughters, but one is very young with ADHD and has had testing and IEPs and that sort of thing. So, but my role is a psychiatrist, and I work in a large hospital setting in the morning and then clinic in the afternoon. I focus on a lot of co-occurring conditions, but schizophrenia and bipolar are the areas I focus on the most. And I'll tell you, both from my own story and my work, that the family support that's there is oftentimes one of the biggest contributors to a person succeeding in recovery and moving forward. And, I've seen that in both a short span of time in a hospital setting or in, patients I can think of that I've had for years and years and years, where I know many of their family members and have seen them go through huge journeys. But that family peer support is something that we don't yet have in my hospital. We have some in the outpatient world. Unfortunately, not through my clinic. I know where to send them, but we don't have anything in the hospital. We have some traditional peer support, but it's lagging behind in the hospital setting, that's for sure. The hospital setting is what I was going to jump into. In both stories, we've talked about hospitalizations and how difficult they are, not just for the person that's there, but for the family. And so my bulk of the time I have left, I wanted to really try to give a practical support or practical kind of tips for what, and I'm trying to pull the curtain back a little bit. What would be the things that I can think of? I mean, I've been on the other side. I literally had a family member hospitalized in a psychiatric hospital just recently that I had to, really change hats and not be the physician anymore, be the family member. Of course, I had some connections, but I want to make sure that you don't need connections in order to be able to get involved in the care of your loved one who might be in the hospital. This really applies mostly to psychiatric hospitalization, but some of these things would still work for a medical hospitalization. For example, if someone's going through detox or medication-assisted treatment in a hospital. It's not going to be as helpful if someone's in the legal setting. Not so much there in a recovery place, some sort of rehab or residential treatment. Some of these will fit, some of these won't. It'll kind of depend. But I'll start with when the person first gets in. And the number one thing is not very many people have family members that are intimately involved. And that's just something that is a sad part of severe mental illness and co-occurring substances. So when you as a family member are involved, the louder you can be, the more present you can be, the repeated times you can be there, both in physical, showing up to the hospital, calling, talking, you're going to make sure that your presence is there, and that immediately the caregivers will start to recognize that, okay, there is a family here we can try to engage with. Because when day one, your loved one is there, especially if maybe they're not doing very well, maybe they are upset with family, maybe they aren't thinking clearly, the people caring for your loved one may not know where you are, who you are, what level of family support there is, but that doesn't mean they're not interested. Most teams that are either in any of those settings I mentioned are desperate to have both involvement from the support standpoint, but also collateral. In co-occurring illnesses, collateral information is crucial, knowing not just what's happening right now, but what's happened in the past, their developmental history, previous treatment history. So many of the hospital systems are sort of siloed. We can't see information from hospitalizations that occurred years ago or in a different state. As we all know, HIPAA and releases of information can limit who can speak to whom, especially from a treatment team perspective. If I'm the doctor, I can't call anybody unless I've got a release of information. So some tips for family members to try to help, even if maybe the person in the hospital, your loved one, is angry or frustrated or not thinking clearly, doesn't want to provide that release of information. I would want to still know the information. So if it were me, the doc, or me, the family member, the more you can call and try to interact with it. Oh, we don't release information, we can't talk to you, or we can't give you information. As a family member, what I would suggest you say is, okay, you don't need to give me the information. I want to give information to you. Most folks on the treatment teams or nursing staff at mental health facilities, treatment facilities, will then listen. Not everybody, but most will listen and just write down the information you give and say, okay, thank you. Some people will say, no, I can't talk to you. I don't even know if that person you're mentioning is here. I can't tell you anything. And then the call ends. But that's not everybody. Most of the time, if you provide information, especially to a nurse, okay, or a social worker, they're going to write that down and pass it along. So remember that that's just one of those little gray zones of HIPAA and release of information. Sometimes you, as a family member, can give information, and that might be beneficial to the care of your loved one, and also making sure that the treatment teams know you're there, you're involved, you want to help, and then they can try to work around the HIPAA release of information themselves. Going back to physically being there, sometimes if you can, and if you're in a different state, that's probably impossible. But if you can go physically to where your loved one is and show yourself, smile, support, bring clothes, bring food, especially if they have special dietary needs or what have you, even if the person doesn't want to see you, obviously we don't want to have you go into a unit and have them try to harm you. We had a story earlier where there might be some danger there. That's different, but bringing things, clothes. And while you're physically there, try that same approach. If you aren't yet involved with the treatment team of your loved one, can you just give information? Can you talk to a nurse, a social worker, somebody that you could just give the background information to in person? They can write it down, pass it along to the doctor or the treatment team or whoever, because that's yet another opportunity for you to sort of insert yourself into their treatment. And maybe the treatment team, even though they don't have release information, they might be able to find another way around it to involve you as the family member, because 99 times out of 100, the treatment team of your loved one is dying to have you be involved, even if it doesn't always feel that way. Some other little tidbits, especially early on a weekend, on a holiday, it really is challenging because the providers may not be there. If I'm gone, someone filling in for me may not know all the intricacies of the case, but yet they still on the weekend have coverage. And if something's going on where you can only visit on a weekend, maybe you're not talking to exactly the treatment team member you want to talk to, but maybe they'll still listen to you and pass it along, giving your phone number, your email, whatever the case may be, so that you can eventually get roped in to the care of your loved one is crucial. You need to take every route you can, and don't give up. Silly thing. Both places I work, when I call somebody from the phone, like on my desk, if I called my wife, anybody from this phone, the number shows up as spam. I'm not making this up. So if you've got somebody, a loved one in the hospital, and your cell phone shows spam or some sort of blocked number, answer it if you can, because it could easily be someone from the treatment team trying to reach you, and they may not have a good call back number. They may not, a lot of places have policies where you can't leave information on a cell phone or home answering machine, because that's not HIPAA protected. And so I may be the doc trying to call you, or maybe I'm a social worker or nurse trying to call you the loved one. You're finally wanting to get involved. Well, I can't leave you a voicemail because that's against the rules. You didn't answer because you thought it was a spam, and there we missed a chance to try to rope you as a family member in. So they seem like silly little things, but I can't even count the number of times that's actually happened to me. I'm on the phone trying to call him, and I don't get an answer, and I'm pretty sure it's because it comes up as spam. As the admission goes on, this is the next little piece I wanted to cover. There gets to be more and more chances for scheduling an in-person meeting where family can be there at the hospital or the whatever facility they're in, interacting with both the person who's got the co-occurring illness and the staff trying to help them. That can be game changing. It can be really challenging, but sometimes it can be a spark for real recovery. But it's difficult. It's challenging because if you don't do it in person and you're trying to do it on the phone or Zoom, it's not as good, but it's still better than nothing, of course. And also, it's a challenge in terms of timing, the weekends or people being gone, or, I only work during the morning. So if I wanted to have a family meeting, it would only have to be in the morning. That's just one of those things that can be really challenging. But if there's any way for you to do it, you can move things, or maybe the treatment team can move things around. I have done treatment meetings on a weekend before, just because it was the only way to get it done. So those are really hard to do, but if they can be done, they can be game changing, earth moving. On the phone is still better, having the person in the room on a speakerphone. I've done that more times than I can count, and it can still be helpful. Knowing the roles of various treatment team members is another important thing. Whether you're talking to a social worker, a nurse, a resident, a student, a doctor, those are the different people you could talk to. And if you're wanting to be involved in the care of your loved one, I would just recommend you talk to anybody you can, but do keep in mind who you talk to, maybe write it down, what their role was, and get their callback number. And then, kind of try to understand what that person's role is in caring for your loved one. That way, kind of what to share with them, but also what to ask them. And then if you're not able to get in touch with those other team members, maybe the person you did get in touch with can help you reach out to those other team members, again, assuming the whole HIPAA thing doesn't get in the way. The whole discharge planning thing, I could talk for hours on it. It's the number one biggest challenge with any, either co-occurring psychiatric admission, medical admission. What's going to happen when this person is ready to leave the hospital is the million or billion-dollar question from day one. And it's not easy for me to give you any specifics on that because every person is so different. You've got insurance things, you've got housing things, you've got medications. Basically, the one piece of advice I'd want to give would be if your loved one is going to be discharged soon, knowing a rough timeline is important, but that changes by the minute. Maybe less focus on what is the exact time, what is just the estimated time. Also, what are the things that are recommended, when the person leaves X or Y or Z? Okay, these are important. Which one's the most important? Which one's the second most important, according to the treatment team recommendations? And you might think that, well, they're all important. Well, maybe trying to stratify which one's most important to the health and safety and recovery of your loved one, it might help. Which one does the discharge planner or the doc or the nurse understand to be the most important or second most important? And then also knowing the when, and of course that's really important. Where should they go? When should they be there? Is the appointment set? Do we need to set it? What's the phone number? What's the address? And what's the second phone number? And the last thing on my list is the pressures that come in all directions on providers to discharge somebody as soon as possible. And that's just an unfortunate thing that, but it's not always something we can't get around. I do oftentimes call it playing the game. I play the game of an insurance, to make sure I have enough time with this person in the hospital to get a couple things done or scheduled or meetings accomplished that might make that difference between that person be able to enter recovery or not. Again, I hope that those specific things help. It's not necessarily that, that there's one way for you as a family member to get involved in a person's stay or a person's discharge planning or a person's, medication discussions or what have you. There's more than one way. I would definitely just recommend that you try to be present as much as you can. Show up there if you can, bringing little things to support the person, food, clothing. Trying to talk to people in person is always a great start. But if you can't do that, even just calling multiple times, spending as much effort as you can, reaching out, trying to get that connection with their treatment team. From my standpoint, I always, and my whole team, always want to get in connection with that family. And if that person keeps trying in various ways to do it, we're going to eventually make the connection, even if we have to jump around, work around, release of information, HIPAA, and so forth, because we know how crucial the families are and their engagement to the success of the person in recovery. So I think I will pass it along so we can do some question and answer.
Thank you so much to all three of our panelists, Muriel, Rachel, and Mark. Really amazing presentations full of not only some great tools and strategies, but also heartfelt experience. So I have some questions for you. I'm going to start with some for everyone and then go into a few specifics. And if the audience wants to put some questions in the chat, I'll ask those as well. And we'll leave a little time at the end where you can raise your hand to be unmuted to ask your question live too. So my first question for the panelists, we're here today talking about co-occurring diagnoses. So I'm curious if you think there are any unique challenges to supporting families of children with co-occurring diagnoses compared to supporting families of children that have a single mental health or substance use diagnoses.
I'll go, Dana. So I think, it's just more complex for that loved one as well as for the parents and caregivers, because you are definitely going to have to navigate multiple systems of care for your loved one. It could be, if they're having substance use and mental health, it could be even mental health and, diabetes. It could be any kind of co-occurring. I think you have to get very organized and you have to make sure you have good documentation, especially if your loved one is under 18. That's how you're able to deal with the different systems that you may have to interact with and write things down. One of the workshops that I've given to parents is to have a folder and a way of tabulating stuff so you can put what meds they're taking, for what diagnosis, and at what times, and if there are any interactions with different meds. So we've done workshops like that to be able to help caregivers and parents find a system that works for them. Because as you know, our system changes once our loved one is over 18, and it can be very, more stressful for the parent or caregiver if they don't have guardianship. So
yeah, I agree with Rachel as well. In my particular case, I knew I had to get guardianship before he turned 18. I already knew it. I mean, for me not to do that would have been very irresponsible. So with that, when that came into place, you're right, there's just so many different things and avenues you have to go. And if they're not able to be in the home or in the community, you have to find the appropriate placement for them where they have that support that they need. And I'm telling you, it's trial and error. It really is. It's trial and error. You can never say that you've mastered this. No, you're just surviving it, getting through it day by day and just trying to fight for what is appropriate for your child, your adult child. I mean, regardless, it's your child. So it's very difficult. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I have said before, when he was diagnosed earlier with the autism, that was easier for me to deal with, to manage, because services were there. It's just more accepted. But when you talk about a serious co-occurring diagnosis, some people just don't get it, and there aren't enough services that are appropriate to support that individual.
And I'll jump in there. The biggest problem I have with the system and its failures, I'll just say it the way it is being siloed. Okay. So while to me as a mental health provider, separating out substance use disorders and mental health use disorders is just ridiculous. Like they are together, and you can't, like my students that come in that don't understand that, I don't even have to tell them. They just walk around and pretty soon they're like, oh, they're just kind of connected. I'm like, yep, they are. And eventually they get it. Well, the problem is that the system at large doesn't get it. If you've never had the exposure to these things, it's a foreign concept. And you see people nodding their heads. The only reason we on the panel know this is because we've lived it. If you haven't lived it, you are just subjected to this system and this lack of understanding that the silos are not helping anybody, number one, and they lead you down this path that these co-occurring things are separate. They're not. They're intertwined, intermingled. You couldn't separate them if you wanted to. It's sort of silly, but it is. So my recommendation would be, try not to fight the silos if you can, because it's so frustrating. Try to use it to your advantage and try to think of each silo as its own set of resources. So that's what Muriel said. You know, you had the autism spectrum resources, and then you've got the serious mental illness resources, and you've got the substance use resources. Try to tap into each one of them and then explore each of those silos and get help if you can from each of those silos instead of trying to fight it, and look for different advocates in each of those silos. And then again, ideally, that family peer support comes in, because they can give you that roadmap of lived experience, which is most valuable for wherever you are, whichever state, whichever, county, even as sad as it is, the county in the state makes a big difference, even in Nebraska. So you start with the silos, start with the peer support with other family members, lived experience, following their roadmap. But fighting the silos is a losing battle. Try to tap into each silo so you've got something coming from each of the silos that exist. And I'll be more specific if need be, but then you can feel like you can get your loved one help from multiple different places and multiple different ways of looking at their condition. That's going to, I hope, be more successful, because the siloing is, someday I hope it's better, but that day's not today.
Right. And I'll just jump in there, Mark. That's why I think advocacy is such a big part of what we do, and that we should do. And that is to teach our parents and people that are having to navigate these systems of care how to advocate, because there's a way to advocate, right? So many of our parents and loved ones are so frustrated and overwhelmed and angry that it's going to come off in a very vinegary way, whereas you get more with honey. So this is a part of the facilitation that I help with the parents that I deal with. Is I know you're frustrated and upset and angry, but we can't be attacking all of the systems that we do have. We need to know how to navigate them to get what we need for our loved one at that point in time. So advocating is a huge part of what we need to know how to do.
Wow, I'm so impressed by all three of you. Mark, your reframing of let's do what we can to bring these systems together and appreciate the separate resources that they bring. Rachel, advocacy absolutely is so important. And Muriel just talking about that really personal experience and how that has taught you how to navigate these systems, really powerful. So the next question I have for you is, what is something that you wish you could go back in time and tell your younger self that might have made your experience supporting either your loved ones or families more successful?
Oh, I can answer that. Give myself a little bit more grace. All right. I'm always called, oh, you're a mama bear, you're a warrior, you're this. I set the bar high. And then when I don't meet that bar, I'm my own worst enemy. And I think a lot of it has caused a lot of some of the physical illnesses that I have had. High blood pressure now, I'm just like, so I would go back and say, give yourself some grace. You can't do everything. Everything's trial and error during this journey. You're just trying to figure things out. And sometimes you only have to work with what the system is giving you. And then you can't blame yourself if it's not successful. So I would say, yeah, I would give myself a little bit of grace so I wouldn't be dyeing my hair all the time to get the gray out.
I love that, Muriel. So I'll go. I was thinking when you said that question, Dana, I was thinking definitely give myself some grace, as Muriel said, be kinder to myself, but also I would have been much kinder to my loved one. When it came to the substance use, I was not understanding. Now I know it's medical and it's co-occurring, but at the time I thought it was a moral failing and a lack of good judgment, and which is unreal to me because I know my loved one and that would not be his choice. But I definitely have learned that in sharing with parents, I do let them know this is a medical issue. Because I think if we normalize it and have people realize this is something medical, a lot of the stigma will change. Just like you have cancer or lupus or diabetes or something, we're not going to make somebody feel bad because they have a disorder or a disease. Why are we doing it with our loved ones that have mental health or substance use? And that I think we need to change. So I would definitely go back, and I've said it to my loved one now, he's in recovery, he's amazing, he's just amazing. And I say to him all the time, I cringe when I think of the things that I said when you were unwell. And he is so gracious and loving and says, Mom, you were a warrior, you did the best you could, I love you. So for me, thank God.
Yeah, I would just jump in and say the way I sometimes say it to students that sometimes rings with them is that mental health conditions don't always present with the signs or symptoms of the mental health condition first. Sometimes they present with the self-medicating symptoms first. Sometimes they present with this drive to make decisions that maybe wouldn't normally be in keeping with their. So anyways, it's sort of the chicken and the egg, or the where does one start and the other end? It's blurry, and trying to distinguish between them is just it's a losing battle, and it doesn't help your loved one. But what I would say the answer to this question for me is I wish I could go back to, I don't think it would mean anything. I think you just have to be a clinician longer and learn to do it. And if you don't, it wouldn't have done me any good if I'd have told my younger self this. Short term, medium term, long term, small picture, big picture. Both things need to be looked at, and both are super valuable. It's almost like today, for example, there was a person I was working with, even in the hospital, was really focused on the short term, and I had to validate that because that's important. But I'm more looking at the bigger picture and the longer term picture, and I'm thinking 2, 3, 4 weeks at a time. I'm probably going to have this person leave the hospital and stay with me as his outpatient doctor. And so I'm thinking way ahead of time, but I always try to balance those two. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think that applies to the loved ones supporting their person with a co-occurring condition, is that I think I don't remember who it was. It might have been Rachel that said, I want to fix this. And that as a parent, boy, I want to use that word, and I just then catch myself, well, you can't do that. That's not the way these things work. And I know it, but I still don't know it. And it's just so difficult. There's short term, medium term, long term, and the more you can pay attention to all three of them, rather than being blinded by one or the other, and have them be together too. But you can't over focus on one or two of them. They're all important, and that is just so hard to do. I'll be the first to say it's still hard to do, but especially the tendency to focus on the short term as being the most important. They're all important. I wish I could go back in time and learn quicker how to do that. It's just really hard.
Yeah, absolutely. We got some great advice in the chat as well. Gina said, I tell myself, ask for help. That's a hard one, a very hard one. Focus on strengths, yours and your loved ones, from Andrea. That's another great one. Samantha said, I would tell myself, you are stronger than you think. And B. Willis said, self-care early on. Absolutely. All of these are such great ideas. B. Willis also says they actually schedule self-care for themselves, which is just so, so important. I love all the suggestions that you three gave. And I think it's important we have a lot of family peer specialists on the call today. And I think it's important for them to take these pieces of advice to heart to pass on to families, but also for themselves as they are supporting loved ones. We know that there's just a mental health crisis right now, and family peer specialists often have so much more on their plates than they themselves can really successfully feel like they're in control of. So giving themselves grace, being kinder to not only the loved ones that might be experiencing some mental health or substance use challenges in their lives, but the families that they work with as well. And then Mark doing that really difficult thing that you said of holding two opposing ideas in your head at the same time, the big picture and the small picture. Really, really important. So I have a few questions for each of you individually, but one more for the whole group. Are there any resources or specific strategies that you want to share with families that you didn't already share during your presentations that are really important go-tos to support individuals with co-occurring disorders?
I'll start. I mean, I think it's important as you go through the process of learning the specifics for your geographic area in terms of resources and, you know, the different silos, if you will. I would make one of those silos maybe a little bit on the legal side. What I mean by that is in the county we're in Omaha, Nebraska, there's this thankfully pretty helpful system of involuntary hospital admission, Board of Mental Health. There's different names for it, you know. That's a system, a process, a sort of a little bit of a game that's played. And if you don't have that as the family member, it can be really overwhelming. And I spend a lot of time sometimes giving parents, especially parents I've gotten to know that are, you know, different chapters. We're always talking about different chapters, lots of different chapters. And so as they're going through the different chapters, helping empower them and give them those little things that aren't little in terms of understanding that system. The legal system is what I mean, where medical legal meet in terms of involuntary hospitalization, you know, corrections or going through with parole officer POs. I'm not going to get into specifics, but I would just add it as a silo, so to speak, that you've got the substance or substance use disorder silo, you've got mental health, you know, inpatient, outpatient silo, you know, there's so many, the medical co-occur, legal. I would make sure that that's another silo, whether that mean, you know, Muriel talked about having gotten an attorney. That's critical, is to whether it be getting an attorney that you pay or getting legal aid, talking to whomever. You know, there's different kind of agencies you might be able to get plugged in with that could really help coach through these legal system, if you will, challenges or information. That silo is an important one, and sometimes unfortunately it's during the crisis, the immediate crisis for your loved one, where knowing that information in detail might help you get them care safer, quicker, without, you know, something bad happening.
Yes, I have to expand upon what Mark said. I agree totally. Having good legal resources is very important for our loved ones, especially with co-occurring. One of the workshops we do is one called It's a Legal Resource Workshop, and the attorney is actually also a peer in that she has a family member with co-occurring. So she gives back to the community by doing this legal resource fair for me every year at no cost. And so people can come on. Because of the pandemic, we had it, with Zoom, but people can come on, all family members can come on and ask the questions that they need to in terms of POA or guardianship or any kind of medical documentation, that they need legally. And also, we're very blessed in our county in that we have a very strong mental health court system. So we have and I've actually been able to sit with the judge. So the judge knows us and Federation of Families and knows, what we deal with and the family members that we care for. And so we will go and advocate and we'll go with parents to court. That is one of the things we do to support them if they have to take that court route with their loved ones. We're there in the courtroom to help them through as a part of family support. So.
And thanks, Rachel. And I agree with you and Mark as well. The one thing that I always say to the families that we serve is that, we tend as parents, we're emotional because of what we're going through. We tend to pick up the phone and do a lot of talking on the phone. That means absolutely nothing when you're really trying to advocate for either appropriate services or whatever it is. I always say, put it in writing, take out your emotions, and just state the facts. That holds people accountable. They have to get back to you. And if you are having a conversation, you should follow up with an email. This is to memorialize our conversation that you're going to do A, B, C, D. You cannot, and I'm sorry, you cannot take people at their face value. Sometimes they forget they said that. Sometimes they're caught up in the moment and they want to help you. Then they're like, I can't do that. So I'm intentional about that. I'm intentional about that, and everything I've done for my son. I mean, there's a paper trail. New Jersey knows exactly who I am, but you know what? I play nice in the sandbox though. And when you play nice in the sandbox, you get better results. That's all I'm going to say. But in the county that we're in, Orange County, they have welcome for parents to be part of the process in identifying service delivery gaps and things of that nature. And I think that's a step forward in Orange County in the state of Florida. That's huge. So get involved with your county, your legislators, your commissioners. Let them know that you want to make a change on behalf of your child and for others in the community. Thank you, Brenda, for the question.
Such great advice. These little nuggets of wisdom. I know people are going to take these away, and I wouldn't have thought, write an email after you have that meeting. And I know that Muriel holds people accountable with her writing, but she also sends letters to the police commissioner to thank them when they do a good job. So all of that is so important. And thanks, Rachel and Mark, for talking about the legal aspects of things. I did put a link in the chat to the Transitions Research Center. They've got some great resources for children who are transitioning into legal age of adulthood. A lot of parents have been bringing this up recently about what to do when my child turns 18 and I didn't realize that I needed to sign these papers so that I could stay involved in their healthcare. So bringing those things up with families is so important, and they may seem small, but they could make just a world of difference. So I've got a question for each panelist, and then we're going to move into some questions we've been getting in the chat. So many great questions. So audience, please keep putting those in there for us. I'll start with Muriel. What was the most helpful thing a clinician said to you when your son was going through a difficult time?
Her name is Cheryl. I remember now. Her name is Cheryl. And I recall getting very emotional. And she said to me, "You're doing all that you can do." She says, "By now, anyone else would have thrown up their hands and walked away from your son." She said, "But you're still hanging in there." And she validated how I was feeling, which I felt like I was failing him. She said, "But no, you're doing a good." She said, "The fact that you're here, you flew up from Florida and you're here." She says, "You're doing a good," and that really made me feel better that I'm doing what I need to do. And sometimes you have to get to that point where, okay, this is all I can do right now. Very simple, but I remember that she encouraged me, and that was not too long ago, trust me.
Yeah, that's so wonderful.
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact quote, but it's not what someone did, but how they made you feel.
Yeah.
And that really seems to resonate there. And I know that a lot of the family peer specialists that we have on the call do such a great job of that. Their jobs are not only to help families feel heard and validated, not only to help them navigate the systems, but also just to be there with them through that journey. And we would love to invite everyone here to a discussion tomorrow where we're going to talk more about what exactly a family peer specialist does. Rachel touched on that specifically for family members with children with co-occurring diagnoses, but join us tomorrow. Gina will put a link in the chat for that. So Rachel, how do you explain to families how mental health and substance use challenges are interrelated?
So like Mark and I touched on before, I really have to break it down for them in terms of, it's almost like that discussion, what comes first, the chicken or the egg, right? So we have that discussion, because it's amazing. I've worked with people themselves that have had substance use issues, and they'll tell you, oh, I don't have any mental health issues. And I'm going, well, yes, you do. Substance use is a mental health diagnosis. But as Mark said, a lot of people don't know that when they come to the table. So for me, it's really about educating our parents and family members that we're giving care to having conversation and showing how they're interrelated. And, you know, there's such a high percentage of loved ones that we have that have both, right? You're blessed if you have a loved one who only has one, but most of them, they go hand in hand. So it's how to understand each one and where to go for help. That is what I think most of the family members come to me about, is how do you treat it? Do you treat one first or the other? And it's really about where they can go in our county to get the help. So, and there's still a lot of clinicians that treat it like they're not a mental health diagnosis, like it's two separate things. So I think, you know, we as an organization, we do a lot of workshops in even to our clinicians in the field. So that's one thing where I think we bring a lot of difference as a peer support organization, is we are educating not just parents and care. We are educating clinicians. We have doctors, lawyers, anyone who wants to come and do youth mental health first aid, you know, RAP, WAM, whatever. We're there to educate them because we are big proponents for that.
Absolutely. It takes a village when we all have the same skills and knowledge, and we're all on the same page, speaking the same language. We're just so much more effective.
And I have to say, the other day I had a training I was doing, and I had a clinician in there, and she was very kind of standoffish in the beginning. And she was like, well, I know all of this, and you're not really a licensed clinician. And by the end, she wrote me a beautiful letter and said, you know, you were so caring and understanding. And by the end, I realized I learned something and I can take it back to my clients as well. So it was a win-win situation for me, because she learned something as a human being for herself and as a clinician that she can share with her clients. So win-win.
Absolutely. Well, my last question for the panel is going to Mark. Mark, I'm curious, how can clinicians effectively integrate family peer specialists onto treatment teams and ensure that they get the respect that their expertise deserves?
Yeah, I mean, 5 years ago, this would have been a difficult question to answer. But at this point, it's mostly a question of funding. We have had great success with having more traditional peer support specialists in various roles, both inpatient and outpatient. And so the idea of having a family peer support specialist it would be readily accepted in the psychiatric community, but we're struggling to get it covered. You know, for example, at our hospital, we had a peer support specialist that was wonderful, and she more or less got hired away from us because everybody else in the community figured out how awesome she was, and they wanted to pay her more than the hospital did, which you know, and she hasn't been replaced. There's no one in that role now. That's really sad, and it's I don't want to get too far into politics of that hospital, but bottom line is that the folks who take on the career, the passion, the calling of peer support, whether it be traditional or family peer support, those people get respect, and that I don't think that getting them the respect would be the challenge. It's getting them there. You know, it's the funding. It's you know, we're having lots of different funding struggles if there's not a way to bill for services. You know, if there's not a CPT code or, you know, whatever. It's DSM-5 is not really the code. It's more of these payer codes. So anyways, my short answer is I think that it's going to be accepted if we can find a way from an advocacy standpoint to get it covered.
Absolutely. And the National Federation is definitely trying to work with educating states and learning from states that are doing this successfully. There are so many states that have figured out how to get those codes so that they can fund family peer specialists. And we just want that to be the case in every state across the nation. So advocacy is super important. Having conversations like this where we hear from clinicians about how important that role is on those treatment teams is really, really important. And I'm happy to hear, Mark, that the folks that you have worked on the clinical side do give peers that respect that they deserve. We also at the National Federation published a checklist for clinicians to assess their skills and strategies around engaging families. So I'll pop that in the chat too for anyone who's interested. We've gotten some really great questions from the audience. So I'm going to move into that. If you had a question that you wanted to answer live, you can go ahead and raise your hand right now. I'll keep my eyes peeled for that, but I'll ask some that were put in the chat first. So this first one is for everyone. How beneficial would it be for mental health clinics to provide information on support resources to families at the onset of their loved one's mental health treatment?
That's really important. That's really important. I will tell you this, with my son's first admission, which he was a teenager, it was in Burlington County, New Jersey. And it was around, and I'm not kidding, it was around 2 o'clock in the morning, okay, being there. I didn't know what to expect. It had never happened. And there was a family partner. That's what her title. She was there and she sat down next to me. I don't know what her hours were, but she was there at 2 o'clock in the morning. And she gave me information on, and it was, I guess, Federation of Families of Burlington County. And she shared her story. She told me what to expect. She said it would be, 72 hours where they're going to assess him. And I did not know that. So it is so important to have that because it's scary because you don't know what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. And I think there should be resources in every hospital and state facility and of everything in that region and county available at admission counters and at discharge planning counters and given during the social work interview when they're talking with the social work. All of these resources should be readily available and given to everyone. There should even be an orientation for parents. I don't even get me started on certain things, because when parents come in and their loved one is hospitalized for the first time, it's so scary for both parties. Somebody should meet with them. They should sit and they should explain the process, what happens, give them all of this information, and then follow up. So the beginning, the middle, and when they're discharged. That's just my little.
Yeah, and I wish it was better. Our hospital is not the best at this. We have we definitely have things fall through the cracks. I'm very aware of it. The bottom line that we end up trying to do is plug the holes as best we can. Our nurses are probably our best hole pluggers in terms of when there's not enough support given to the family. When I was giving my little rant on little things you guys can write down and kind of use, from my standpoint, if your loved one is ever hospitalized in our facility, the nurses are really the ones who are the connectors. And I think the reason is really saying, piggybacking on what Muriel said, they're the ones there at 3 a.m. They're the ones there during visiting hours. And for good or for bad, the doctor's usually not there. And, I feel kind of bad about it, but I'm there on call, not sleeping sometimes. So, it's one of those deals where I'm there, but not there. And my nurses are the ones who are there. And I've really thankfully got a bunch of nurses who love their job, or are great at it, and are passionate and caring and empathic, but they're also, many of them, from their own lived experience backgrounds, had folks in their family, sons, daughters, parents with co-occurring conditions. And so all I'd say is that if all else fails, I know COVID has been really hard on our nurses and our teachers for what it's worth, but the nursing profession really took it on the chin. But I still think that they're the best recommendation I would make for you guys with loved ones, or as you're counseling families, to try to connect with nurses if all else fails.
Great advice. Something I heard from Rachel and Muriel just now, and also throughout this conversation, really mirrors something we're hearing from families as we do listening sessions, that there are resources out there, but folks don't know how to get them. They don't know about them. They don't know who to ask. So one of the really key things I'm hearing is it's important for us to find ways to pass those resources on to family members. So another audience member asked, how can parents get a POA if the child is already over 18 and in psychosis?
So I think it depends what county you're in. In our county, there is a ex parte that you'd have to go to the court to fill out a form, and then the judge would have the loved one taken to be assessed and evaluated. But then the parent and caregiver, upon that assessment and evaluation, would have to have an attorney do some kind of POA/guardianship, even if it's a temporary guardianship, to be able to get help. And it depends on what state and county you're in and what the laws are in that state and county.
That's the most challenging part of answering this, but I would break it down into, in general, most states are this way. There's the legal route and the medical route. Legal route, most time you need a lawyer and a judge. Medical route, it's variable, really variable from county to county, state to state. It's almost always one of those situations where you need to phone a friend. You need to have some sort of support from someone who's lived this involuntary commitment, or board of mental health, or EPC is another term you'll hear thrown around. It's just so different, but there is another way. So just one is, you need a clinician, or in some cases a police officer, I suppose, is the other way, officer, sheriff, what have you, to initiate that process. 911, calling county attorneys' offices, looking on their websites about petitions that can be filled out, board of mental petition, or mental ill and dangerous, all these different fancy terms that are kind of legal-ish sounding, but then they activate the medical system process, whatever that is, and I know ins and outs of how to play that game in the 2 counties here, but in your state it might be different. But just remember, there's not just one way. POA, legal guardianship, that's the legal way. Then there's the legal to medical, or just plain medical way, that's more of an emergency. It has to be done now. That's when you can how do I say this delicately? Sometimes really bad situations where your loved one is at critical risk for harm to themselves or others is actually one of your best times to get them care, because now you may not need to use a lawyer, or you can maybe bypass this expensive, time-consuming, need a lawyer and a judge. You can skip that and go right into, it's scary. I know your person that your loved one's doing the worst maybe they've ever done, but this might be an opportunity to get them care maybe that they don't otherwise want by using the other side of the system, which is an emergency. Life or limb is in danger. Yeah, you may need to get police involved, but then there's some sort of system in most counties, most states, to have, especially psychosis, treated against a person's will in a medical setting without a judge, without a POA, without a guardian.
Great. Thank you so much for that advice. There were a couple questions I just want to answer really quickly. A few folks were asking how they can find a family peer support specialist in their area. At the National Federation of Family, we do have a list of affiliates, and you can go to that map that I just put in the chat, and you can find your state and see if you have a local affiliate. If not, please reach out and we can try to connect you to some folks who might be looking to start an affiliate there. We had another question about how to become a family peer support specialist, whether there's a state or national certification. The National Federation does certify family peer specialists at the national level, so I dropped a link in the chat there as well. States also sometimes have their own certification, and you can reach out to me if you have any questions about that. And you can also come to an event we have tomorrow. Going to talk a little bit more about that. I think we have time for one more question, but before I ask that, I do just want to invite everyone here to our last webinar this year with SAMHSA about including and elevating fathers in family mental health support. And I put a link to the registration in the chat as well. So to close us out, I'm going to give each of you 1 minute to kind of rapid fire answer this last audience question. They are asking if there is any specific material you might suggest for family members, such as a podcast, reading material, TED Talk, or anything specifically that can support family members who are themselves supporting a loved one with a co-occurring diagnosis.
I find SAMHSA and National Federation with a lot of resources that I have pulled and passed on to family members and also used myself. So that's my fast answer.
Yes, and NIMH as well. And also one of the books I also give our parents to read is Codependent No More. I read it first. And Who Moved My Cheese, believe it or not, which is a very tiny book, but it's all about change and being adaptable. Because as caregivers and loved ones that are in this position, we have to be able to adapt and change to be successful. So thank you.
NAMI is another good one. It's been mentioned earlier today. I would just be really careful of Dr. Google. Dr. Google is my least favorite doctor. The stuff that's on there is just so misleading and so oversimplifying. And I have had a little bit better feedback and experiences voiced to me by family members from different social media groups, Facebook groups, and that kind of thing. That's definitely better than just a straight Google. But even then, the advocacy groups are always going to trump. These national, all of these different acronyms we've thrown out are always going to trump Dr. Google. Just Googling something has got to be, it's so frustrating. I hate the misinformation that comes from those first 5 different entries when you Google something, and you're almost better off clicking links from people you trust than Googling anything at all.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. This was so powerful. Thank you for sharing your professional and your personal expertise. And I'm sure folks are going to be checking out your respective organizations for more. I'll turn it back to you, Kelly.
Thank you so much, Dana. And again, thank you to our presenters, Muriel, Rachel, and Mark. Thank you so much for sharing your stories and for presenting today. And Dana, you did a fantastic job moderating. Yes, give her a hand. All right, I would like to thank SAMHSA again for sponsoring this webinar, and I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. When you close out, please fill out that survey to let us know how you enjoyed today's webinar. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.